On this video, I'm going to see if 38's will work with just 2.5 inches of lift. All right, let's get to it. So the tire and wheel I'm running is a 38 by 1350 Nitto Trail Grappler, and it is mounted on a 17 by 8.5 wheel from Method. This particular tire and wheel package actually belongs under my Jeep Gladiator, and the reason that they found their way under my Wrangler is that this wheel has 4 3/4 inches of backspacing. I wanted to see, could I get away with that backspacing with the current suspension configuration. I knew that I was going to need to bump stop it, but I figured if I could run a 38, a 37 would be no big deal. So that's kind of where this tire and wheel package came from, if it looks familiar to you. And yes, I will have an update on that Jeep very soon. Okay, so let's talk about suspension lift and more importantly, bump stops. So I'm running a JKS Manufacturing 2.5 inch lift with Fox 2.5 Performance Elite shocks with DSC adjusters. Now, to run this true to size 38 that I wanted to run, I knew that I would need to do a little bit more bump stop than when I originally had this Jeep set up for 37s. Now, in the front on a 392 Wrangler, the bump stop tower is actually 2 inches lower than it is on all other Wrangler models. So that means I'm already starting out with 2 inches of bump, so I did not really need a lot at the axle. In fact, what I ended up doing is using the stackable 1/2 inch spacers that came with my JKS kit. I modified one of the top spacers so it would have a smoother spot for the jounce bump to land on, and just did a 1 inch spacer up front. Out back, I was already running a 2 inch spacers, given I knew I needed at least 2 inches for the 37 to cycle, and all I did is add a 1/2 inch spacer from JKS to that, and that was it. So out back, 2.5 inches of total bump stop spacing, and in front, realistically, I have 3 inches of bump stop. So if you are a non-392, you're going to need a 3 inch bump stop to replicate what you see in this video. If you are a 392, all you will need is a 1 inch bump stop. Now, how does this work? Well, I initially wasn't really sure. I knew it would be fine for driving around town, but I headed out to my local sand mine to get some quick cycling before I went to the rocks, and this is what I found. Now, I've pulled up, backed up, done every which way, and the front does not seem to be a problem. It's actually on bump stop right now, and it will get higher when the Jeep is a little bit more twisted, but up front, it's pretty much fine. So this is how it is with the bump stop completely collapsed out back. Now, as you can see, it is extremely tight here, but we are not touching this portion of the flare. It's only hitting on the inside plastic, so I'm not too worried about that. It clears the slider just fine. That high numerical backspacing is keeping it out of this, which is really a big deal. In the back, you can see it's close to that piece of chassis right there, or I'm sorry, the body, but it's not hitting. Good thing I pulled this off. I think that may have interfered, but other than that, it's fitting pretty well. Once I established that the tires wouldn't rip off the fenders as soon as I hit the trail, I loaded up my kids for one last summer wheeling trip to Uwharrie National Forest. Before hitting the trail, I aired down the tires to 12 psi. While this wheel isn't a true bead lock, it is part of Method's bead grip line of wheels, which means it has a proprietary internal design that holds the bead of the tire in place better than a traditional wheel set. My particular wheel is the 701 series with a matte black finish, just in case you're curious. While I could tell instantly that the steering with this tire and wheel set was much heavier over the 37s I was using previous, the ride quality was fantastic. I did end up increasing the high speed and low speed compression settings on my Fox shocks by about 2 clicks on the trail, which helped not only control the massive rubber, but adjusted for the fact that I did lose a bit of up travel. Aside from grabbing a small portion of the plastic on the back of the inner fender, I never felt the tire grab or interfere with the body over the 2 days of wheeling we were there. Now, our trip was a little eventful. The first day we encountered a lot of fallen trees due to a storm that had passed through previously, and the next morning we found ourselves in a torrential downpour on top of the Daniel Trail. Thankfully, the trail grapplers work unbelievably well in wet and dry conditions, so it really wasn't a big issue, and we all still had a good time. Now, I will admit, I feel like a 38-inch tall tire is absolutely pushing the limit of what the factory axles can handle. The nice thing about having them aired down, you're getting a lot of traction and a great ride quality, but that footprint will also put a lot of load on the factory axle shafts. The 392 comes with CV style front shafts, and I heard a little bit of popping and clicking coming from my front end more than once, so I was trying my best to use the front locker as little as possible. This is an area I'm definitely going to be upgrading soon, regardless if I'm going to be staying with a 38 or moving back to a 37. In terms of low range power off-road, the V8 provides plenty of power, and the 456 differential gears was a good match for the 38s overall on the trail. Now, with a V8 engine and 456 differential gears, I don't really feel like the Jeep is underpowered in any way. That being said, compared to the 35s this Jeep came with, you definitely feel that larger 38. The 37 between the 38 with the Trail Grappler, not as big of a difference, but the main thing that I can feel with that in terms of on-road performance is acceleration. With the 37s, I keep the 392 in two-wheel drive using a Taser from Z Automotive, and what I find is if you punch it with 37s, you basically spin the tires, especially in a low gear. With the 38s, it hooks up a little bit more, so you definitely feel that larger footprint and a little bit of a power loss. In terms of overall, like keeping overdrive gears on the highway, it has no problem. I'm right about 2,000 RPM at 70 miles an hour, so the 456 gear is fine for that. In terms of fuel economy, didn't really see a huge difference. This thing usually averages around 13 miles per gallon. The highway fuel economy is what actually is terrible on this thing. So anything above 65 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour, it really drops down. I'm usually seeing like 12, 13. Where I live in the coastal plains of North Carolina, I'm usually around like 45, 55. And if I can stay really consistent with that, I can get, 15 miles per gallon. That's, it's not a great vehicle for fuel economy. The main thing that I can tell the difference pretty heavily between the 37s and 38s is both of the 37s that I've tested on this thing had high numerical backspace, and the steering never felt, too heavy, even off-road. This, you definitely can feel, it's the combination of that larger tire and different backspacing figure. The steering feels a little bit heavier. Not so much that I would say you have to have hydraulic assist, but if you're doing a lot of rock crawling with a 38, it's probably going to be something that you'll eventually want to do, because when this front end's locked, it's just too hard and sometimes impossible to steer it. The 37s were already borderline, so if you're going to be doing more technical wheeling, stuff like that, you'll probably need to consider doing some sort of steering upgrade for it. Now, in terms of running a full-size spare, I was able to bolt it up without any issue. Now, I do have the Mopar tire relocation kit and tailgate reinforcement. All I did for the third brake light was move it up one hole, same thing you have to do for a 37. In terms of the rubber isolators in the back, it's actually contacting the tire, so you don't get a lot of rattle and shake going down the road. Now, here's the big negative. It does hit the back bumper, so you have to put a little bit more force when you're opening and closing the tailgate. Now, for light wheeling and daily driving, this is perfectly fine. I think if you're going to be doing some more aggressive off-roading, this is just a lot of tire to hang off that Mopar kit. I'd probably go with something a little bit stronger. Now, it is worth mentioning that my JKS lower control arms are actually bent in, just like from the factory, to offer more tire clearance. Even though they do have more clearance over a straight control arm, I did find that the 38 touched the arm just a few times off-road. If you have a straight arm, this 4 3/4 inch backspacing figure probably won't work for you. So ultimately, the good news is, yes, 38s with 2.5 inches lift will absolutely work, and not just for mall crawling. If you have a different tire and wheel, really if you have a different wheel back spacing, this could change. If you have a wheel with 3.5 inches of back spacing, it's going to push that tire package more away from the vehicle, and you might interfere with the fender more, and that could rub and might not work for you. So for me, this setup absolutely works, but ultimately it gave me the information I needed, which is 4 3/4 inches of back spacing is going to be ideal for me, and I'm going to go back to a 37, which I will show you guys in a later video. If you guys have any questions for me, just drop them right here in the comments. You can always see what I'm going on behind the scenes at Ollie Mansour Editor on Instagram. And until next time, I hope to see you guys on the trail. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing to the Driving Line channel. Our goal is to excite, entertain, and educate you on all things automotive. So if you want to come be part of our journey, please hit that subscribe button, and we hope to see you on the next video. Take care.